I am with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm going to quickly cover the overview of the SEC. A lot of folks hear SEC and they think Southeastern Conference, and we have something to do with basketball. Well, I don't know anything about that. I'm going to talk about investments and red flags of fraud, some common scams, and tips to avoid scams. I also have a nice disclaimer. You'll probably hear this a lot from government folks, but that the SEC's Office of Investor Education and Advocacy is providing this information as a service to investors. This presentation is not a statement of official SEC policy, a legal interpretation, or investment advice. So, what do we do, the Securities and Exchange Commission? We protect investors, maintain a fair and orderly market, and facilitate capital formation, which means bringing new companies to market, right? We oversee and regulate a lot of registrants, investment advisors, everybody's heard of investment advisors, mutual funds, companies, public companies like new companies that are coming to market like Lyft and Uber, or older companies like Johnson & Johnson and AT&T, right? We look at their filings every year. We examine 3,800 broker-dealers that have 63 or 630,000 registered reps, municipal advisors, transfer agents, the stock exchanges, credit rating agencies that rate bond issuances, clearing agencies, and self-regulatory organizations. We are 4,000 people strong. We have a lot of work to do. As I said, we review the disclosures of public companies. We examine and enforce, examine broker-dealers and those other market participants. We enforce the federal securities laws and bring actions against them when we find that they are doing things that violate that. And we collect more than $4 billion from more than 800 enforcement actions last year. So we're a busy group of folks. My office is the Office of Investor Education and Advocacy. We respond to complaints and inquiries from investors. We processed nearly 17,000 complaints last year. And our website, which is going to be very important to you all, investor.gov, has a lot of very important information. Educational, alerts of new scams and things coming out, as well as information you can order for your own programs. The other big thing that we do on investor.gov that I'll get into in a little bit, everybody can do a background investigation of their investment professional, seeing if they're registered, what their history is, where they've worked, if there are complaints against them, what kind of complaints, do you want to do business with that person? So it's a very important resource. So fraud. Fraud has become quite prolific in the social media age. Not only are people, I know all the people you deal with are getting those crazy phone calls all the time, but social media also has a lot of fraud. The pop-ups, are you interested in this? They pull you down those rabbit holes. More than 8 in 10 people are solicited for a potentially fraudulent offer. And that's about $50 billion per year that's lost to fraud. Those are staggering numbers.
You mailed in my company a postcard a few weeks back requesting information on penny stocks that had huge upside potential with very little downside risk. Does that ring a bell? Okay, great. Well, reason for the call today, John, is something just came across my desk, John. It is perhaps the best thing I've seen in the last 6 months. If you have 60 seconds, I'd like to share the idea with you. You got a minute? Name of the company, Aerotine International. It is a cutting-edge, high-tech firm out of the Midwest awaiting imminent patent approval on a next generation of radar detectors that have both huge military and civilian applications. Now, right now, John, the stock trades over the counter at 10 cents a share. And by the way, John, our analysts indicate it could go a heck of a lot higher than that. Your profit on a mere $6,000 investment would be upwards of $60,000.
Jesus, that's my mortgage, man.
Exactly, you could pay off your mortgage.
This stock will pay off my house.
John, one thing I can promise you, even in this market, is that I never ask my clients to judge me on my winners. I ask them to judge me on my losers because I have so few. And in the case of Aerotime, based on every technical factor out there, John, we are looking at a grand slam home run.
Okay, let's do it. I'll do $4,000.
4,000, that'd be 40,000 shares, John. Let me lock in that trade right now and get back to you with my secretary with an exact confirmation. Sound good, John?
Sounds good.
Great. Hey, John, thank you for your vote of confidence, and welcome to the Investors Center.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
It's okay. All right, so The Wolf of Wall Street is a movie about fraudulent investment scams. Here's some the red flags of fraud, and it's worth a viewing of that movie. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. There's incredible gains. You're going to make so much money. This is cheap stock that, if you could only put a little bit of money, you're going to make a fortune. There's no risk. You've got a huge upside. You're going to run away with a lot of money. The second is the pressure to buy right now. We don't have a lot of time. You can only get in right now. Send me your money quickly. That kind of pressure should always be a red flag to everybody. Lack of documentation, especially with investment type offers. If they can't give you something to look at and read, it's likely a fraud. In the investment world, you can always buy something tomorrow. So please just remember that. Unsolicited offers are investment fraudsters look for victims through social media and mail, as we talked about. If you receive a can't-miss offer from someone you don't know, your best move is to pass it up. They're not coming to you and out of the blue and giving you the deal of the century. It's just likely fraudulent. So these are some of the persuasion tactics that folks use. So let's start with phantom riches, dangling the prospect of wealth, enticing you with something you want but you can't have. Source credibility, trying to build credibility by claiming to be with a reputable firm or to have special credential or experience. A lot of folks we see use names of firms that sound like other firms, so they sound legit. So you can, as I said, you can always do that background check. Scarcity. We're running out. You better go now. Hurry up. Hurry up. That's definitely a red flag. Reciprocity. Offering to do a small favor for you in return for a big favor. A lot of those are, you've just won $500,000, but you have to pay the taxes on it first. So if you send me a check, a smaller check, then I'm going to send you the bigger check. Don't do that. Don't give anybody money. Social consensus, lending you to believe that other savvy investors have already invested. The one I hear the most is, I sell this to my mother. If I sold it to my mom, it's good for you too. So you have to really think through those tactics and think if it's true or not. Some common scams in the investment world. Pump and dumps. These are terms you might have heard before. Pyramid schemes. I'll go through the whole list of these, but one that's very important for this group is probably Affinity Fraud. So listen to that one when I get there. Questionable communications. Things like forcing you to make a decision quickly might be a red flag. Disguising their real numbers. I'm sure everybody has seen this right now. Somebody calls you and the phone number looks just like your own phone number. How do they do that? Impersonating a government person, as we all know, right? Most government agencies aren't calling you directly. The IRS is not calling you. They're not calling you to tell you they're going to arrest you because you haven't paid your tax. They're not doing that. They're never doing that. The SEC is not calling you to say, we want you to invest in something. That's not what we do. So And what these callers do is try to get your personal communication. The newest thing is travel offers. You know, you can win a great deal to someplace, but you're going to have to give money, and then that money disappears. So just you have to make sure these offers are legit. Don't give your credit card information over the phone, and don't give your personal information over the phone. So pump and dumps. These involve hyping or pumping up the price of a stock. So they want you to get in early. They want you to buy cheap. It's a $5 stock. If you buy 100 shares, it's not that much money, and it's going to go through the roof. What these folks do, and this is what the Wolf of Wall Street is about, is get you to buy it low. They already own the stock. They pump up the price. It goes from $5 to $20. You guys think you've made a fortune. They're selling it the whole time it's going up, and by the time you want to get out, it's crashed and it's now worth pennies. So those are called penny stocks or micro-cap companies. This is a really a get-rich-quick scheme that people use to try to just get any amount of money. Next one, Ponzi schemes. What's the Ponzi scheme? The biggest Ponzi scheme you've heard of? Mr. Madoff, right. So what did he do? He promises high returns with no risk, have very consistent returns, always tells you, all my customers made 25%, 50% on their money consistently. Can't tell you how he does it. It's the magic soup I do, but it works. Trust me. And what a Ponzi scheme is they take your money, pay off the original investors, and then get more money from new investors, pay off you, and it's this craziness. But so Ponzi schemes can happen with a little bit of money, can happen with a lot of money. Pyramid schemes. Emphasis on recruiting others to join. You've probably all heard this. You're going to make money if you bring more money into it. It's a promise of easy money. You get high returns and you get them quickly. They have no demonstrated revenue from any retail sales or whatever it is you're trying to sell. And complex commission and compensation structure. It's hard to understand how you're going to get paid if you join it, and then all of a sudden you don't get paid. Advance fee fraud. We just talked about this. They ask for an advance payment on something, and then you're going to get the big payoff. And what they do is get a lot of people to give them this smaller amount of money that sounds doable, and they take off with it. Government impersonators talked about this. The government is not going to call you. Investment newsletters. You might get a newsletter that talks about investing in stocks that you haven't heard of or stocks that sound like other stocks. Investment newsletters are not necessarily fraudulent, but they might have fraudulent information in them. So there's a way to check on what they're offering, and I will talk about that in a minute. Affinity fraud. This is what I mentioned. Affinity fraud is you belong to a group or a community, and somebody inside that community is trying to sell you something. You trust them because you know them, or they've been referred by somebody you know, and you give them money. We have had a lot of enforcement cases that we found scammers just like this. There was one, a pastor in Texas who collected so much money from his parishioners and bought yachts and, used all the money for himself. And everybody trusted him. So there's a way to, on investor.gov, check the background of the person selling you something. If it's a security, they should be registered. So, and you can check if the security is registered by going to sec.gov and looking on our EDGAR system. So there's ways to do a double check before you get scammed. Groups that are targeted with affinity frauds, seniors and retirees are targeted all the time, especially by people they know because they trust them. Folks are lonely. They're talking to people. It's nice. They're going to give them something. Ethnic communications, military personnel get caught up this in a lot. A military, an ex-military person is selling them something. There's an affinity there. They want to help that person. It's not necessarily always real. Professional athletes, I'm sure you've read it in the paper, have gotten scammed by their own. Federal employees have. I'll go over something in a second, and religious groups. So here's an affinity fraud case that we did where a former Marine operated a hedge fund and defrauded his fellow veterans and current military and others. He claimed the annual returns were nearly 200%. They raised nearly $1.8 million from investors. He invested half that money and spent at least $400,000 on luxury cars, mansions, gambling, and nightclubs. That was a real case. This is also a real case where fraud was targeting federal employees, where this firm induced employees to roll over their TSP savings, their thrift savings plan, which is our 401k, to an IRA rollover, that those new programs had much higher fees. They put them in variable annuities. They couldn't get their money out. They created a false impression that the firm was affiliated or approved by the federal government and misled the investors about fees and the returns on the annuities. So they were in their TSP and then moved it over and lost their retirements. So tips to avoid fraud. Here's the ask and check on investor.gov. Check the background of the broker or investment advisor on investor.gov. As I said, you can see if they have any disciplinary actions, what their history of customer complaints is, their previous employment. A red flag here is if you have somebody hopping from firm to firm to firm to firm. That usually means they're trying to get away from bad behavior and start new again. So doesn't always mean that, but it's a red flag. This was our public service announcement about doing a background check.
You guys are definitely getting in at the perfect time.
This investment opportunity will not last long. I shouldn't say this, but I can guarantee
That your money will double.
and there's absolutely no risk to you.
So, how's 20 grand to start?
Most fraudsters aren't this easy to spot. Find out if you're dealing with a registered investment professional with a free simple search at investor.gov. Before you invest, investor.gov.
It's a great public service ad. Investor.gov, you can do it on mobile, you can do it on your computer. On here is a lot of good information, especially if you're teaching others, right? We have brochures that you can order to hand out. I wish I had brought some with me myself. There's also a lot of, as I said, alerts and or just investor information. There's an Investor 101, a little bit like the FDIC. What all these terms mean. Investments have a lot of lingo in it, so it's a very great educational tool. We also have documents that explain what's a variable annuity, what's a mutual fund, what's a life cycle fund, what's just a mutual fund in general, so you can educate yourself and others on these investment terms. It gets complicated. I've been in it in a long time. It gets complicated. As I said, you can go to EDGAR, which is on sec.gov, and look up the product that somebody's trying to sell you. Is it registered with us? Some folks do sell unregistered products, but that's when you should start asking a lot more questions about it. But if it's registered, you can get a lot of good information on that product. You can get information on the management of the company. They have to make filings if they're registered. they have to disclose if the company's having problems. So you can get a lot of information on products. And as the bottom, scams often involve unregistered companies. So just, it's a red flag to ask more questions. That's what EDGAR looks like. And then I wanted to add this slide in for seniors especially. We do a lot of work with seniors and, getting, preparing for the future. And if diminished capacity becomes an issue, or the children need to know what a parent is doing and where information is, to organize the important documents that you have. The will, where your money is, what your bank accounts are, all that kind of thing. You can provide emergency contacts at brokers and now and investment advisors if, in fact, a broker or investment advisor suspects that there might be diminished capacity issues or possible elder financial fraud, that they have the ability to call somebody and say, hey, I noticed something. Can we talk? Consider written instructions on what you want to do with your finances, and involve somebody you trust, because there's a lot of scams out there, and we have seen some terrible, terrible things where close contacts, family members are stealing elders' money because they can get access to their computers, and it's that trust. And seniors, we have found, feel or are embarrassed and don't want to report this. But we have done a lot of analysis on reports that come into our agency, and it's going on out there. So if there's a way we can stop that financial elder exploitation, it's starting to do these kinds of things. So with that, the SEC resources are important. Please go to investor.gov. Thank you.